Good morning, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Katie Coletto. I lead the HCM product marketing team here at Workday on the talent optimization side. And I would like to welcome you today to today's conversation, how today's workforce is reshaping payroll. So I am very honored and excited to be joined today by Cosine Huang, who is our Director of Product Marketing for Workforce Management, and our partner, Wilson Silva, who is the Senior Vice President of Outsourcing Delivery at Alight Solutions. So before we get started, I just want to let you know that if you have comments or questions throughout today's discussion, please add them to the comment stream below or visit us on Twitter at hashtag wdaychats. So hashtag wdaychats. So let's go ahead and get started. And I would love for you to introduce yourselves and give us a little bit of background on your expertise in payroll. So Cosine, why don't you go first?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am Cosine Huang, and I am the product marketing lead for payroll and workforce management. And I've been working with companies of all sizes and around payroll and their HR transformation for many years now. And I'm really excited today to share with you guys some of the trends that we're seeing in technology.
Excellent. Wilson?
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wilson Silva. I am the Senior Vice President for Alight Solutions. I have responsibility for managing our ongoing operation as well as managing the team that works on implementations, documenting requirements so that our team, once we go live, can take that on. I've been at Alight for 19 years. I've been in the HR and payroll space for close to 30 years. I had my start in public accounting and then ultimately migrated into the HR and payroll space. But I'm very happy to be here and hopefully share some of the same insights that we're gathering.
Excellent. Well, we're so happy to have you here. And I know everyone out there is really excited that next week is National Payroll Week. So be kind to your payroll professionals, thank them, and let's have a little bit of chat about payroll. So, when we look at the world of HR, we know that it's transforming in a massive way. There are all sorts of forces that are impacting the way that we approach all of the HR, the spectrum of activities. One is certainly technology. Technology is starting to impact every job. We are seeing the gig economy take hold, the gig workforce. Workers are much more fluid in switching jobs, other than Wilson, switching jobs very frequently, more than once every 19 years. But I'd love to hear from you two what you're seeing in terms of trends in HR, and then we'll jump into payroll after that.
Yeah, so thank you for that great intro, Katie. So we're seeing a number of key drivers in the market that's really helping to shift things forward. One thing is that we see the nature of work is changing. So work is changing, workforces are changing, and the workplace is changing. So by that I mean with the type of work people are doing, like you said, there's a lot of gig work, a lot of contract work, right? But they want to be able to work how they want, when they want, with the flexibility that they want. And the composition of the workforce is also changing. We're seeing the demographics shift from just salary workers making up the majority of employees at companies to being a really diverse mix of contract workers, freelance workers, contingent workers, hourly, billable, right? So there's a variety of ways to pay people, and they have different expectations about how and when they want to be paid, right? And then lastly, I mentioned the workplace is changing. So the distance, the physical distance and ability to work wherever you want in the world. We're seeing a lot of that. People expect to be able to access work via mobile, via chat, via Slack and Microsoft Teams. So being able to enable your HR and business processes to serve those kinds of expectations, that's really driving things forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just
anything to add?
Yeah, just add. We're seeing the same expectations, the same trends. I think a key stat there with regards to the competition of the talent. So many of the things that you said with regards to how the world is changing in terms of where they want to work, how they want to work. In addition to that, 10,000 baby boomers will be retirement eligible every day for the next 19 years. So that puts a little bit of impact in terms of
Wow.
the supply of the workers will be diminished. I saw an interesting stat the other day that for workers between the ages of 15 and 34, their average tenure is 2.8 years. So unlike me, they
Wow.
are turning
Wow.
over a lot quicker.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think what that does is just put employers in a position of having to compete hard with making sure they get the right talent. And I
Right.
think, as you mentioned, some of those things that will factor into that is not just purely having strong compensation and benefits, but it's also having that flexible workplace, being able to bend a little bit in terms of when they want to work, where they want to work. And that's what I think employers will be challenged to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think I also see that there's a competition for all these people with very similar skills. So people with newer skills, more in-demand skills, have so much choice of where to go. And so employers have a pretty high bar in trying to make themselves look different, look attractive for the employees.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think employers will have to differentiate themselves. It won't be just enough to compete purely on the
Salary.
traditional salary and benefits package. They'll have to do other things, and that agile workplace, that flexibility will matter.
Yep.
Yeah, for example, we see that Uber is trying to differentiate themselves in the market by paying people 5 times a day, up to 5 times a day.
Wow.
Can you imagine? And we're entering this world where all of these gig workers and freelancers, they're expecting to be paid when they want. So, as payroll professionals, we really need to think about how we support that going forward.
And I think that's a good segue into, let's take it from the HR level to payroll. What are you seeing in the world of payroll that is changing in parallel to these trends in HR?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll say that I think there's maybe two things. One clearly hits on what you're saying. The frequency at which people want to be paid, and then the frequency or the speed at which you pay, I think, is clearly a trend. So in the area of the frequency, many employees, just as you implied, they're looking for, I work, I want to get paid, and not to say that payroll professionals will find themselves in the process of running payroll every single day. But there will have to be the need whereby you have the ability to pay them a little bit more on demand. We're working with vendors as an example where there are vendors out there that can support you with regards to being able to have an employee draw down, if you will, take an advance on accrued but not yet paid wages. So it's not necessarily running payroll every day, but it's giving them the ability to actually get paid for the work that they've done sooner than they normally have in a weekly, bi-weekly pay frequency, which I think is clearly a trend that's coming.
Yeah.
I think with outside of that even with other methods of distribution, payroll folks have always had the challenge of the same-day termination, getting people paid. In California, for example, who terminate. We're also working with vendors to. The payroll team does the normal thing, process the pay, but in terms of the distribution, instead of printing it and overnighting it, we'll begin to email that check, and upon receipt, you can go into an application, and within that application, they can print the check and then hand it to the employee. So the speed at which you can process the payroll,
funds.
yes, so you can get it into their hands same day, which today is a challenge for payroll professionals.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah, and it's not just payroll processing. You mentioned earlier, Katie, about how technology is really changing everything, right? So there's also self-service, right? Being able to, I know most companies now have mobile pay slips, right? But in the future, you should be able to ask Siri or even Alexa for your pay slip. And so that kind of changing customer service to your employees, that kind of engagement level is different. And also, I mean, you currently might, log into your phone using facial recognition and biometrics, right? We're starting to see, for instance, time and attendance clock in and clock out using biometrics on your phone, so that you can't commit time fraud as easily, right? So those are some of the things that we're seeing as well. So not just even beyond the payroll processing piece of it.
Wow.
Maybe just to add,
Oh,
the
go
other
ahead.
the other big trend I think is automation. I think that's
Yeah,
affecting both
that
the
we're seeing.
HR side as well as the payroll side. Whether that's in the form of RPA robotics, taking some high volume transactions and being able to create a bot that actually performs a lot of the manual processing that payroll processors in the past have done. I think that will become a growing trend. And the one that I think is maybe more interesting is artificial intelligence or machine learning. The payroll space has, when you run the gross to net, you're looking at trying to do a quality review. And today, quality review, probably done by all payroll people out there, is done by running certain reports, looking for things that may be incorrect, and to the extent that you find those, you correct them before you complete the payroll. I think going forward, machine learning will allow us to start looking at every earning, deduction, and tax that exists for an employee in a particular run, and using their historical pay, identify anomalies. So we'll start using the power of the machine and machine learning to identify the anomalies, as opposed to a payroll analyst looking for specific things. And I think that's a changed mindset. You're not
Right.
going out and looking at the traditional things that go wrong in a payroll. You're actually
Yeah.
allowing the software to tell you, hey, this looks odd, this is an anomaly, and then you have to spend time doing the research to dispose of that issue.
Right. So it really changes what the humans do in the payroll process.
It will absolutely change that. I think the payroll professional in the future may have it a little bit more challenging. There's a lot for them to
It's
learn.
challenging today, isn't it?
It is very challenging today, and I think their role in the future becomes a bit more challenging, where they will be expected to already understand what I would say the end-to-end payroll process. The interesting thing is that today, and I think about people running payroll today, they've all, for the most part, grown up on it. But imagine 10 years from now, when you're hiring in new people and a lot of the work has been automated. I think the way that people learn today is through on the job. You sit down, you know how you do something, you execute, you get good at it, you become a subject matter expert. In the future, when so much of it is done by machines and done outside of what you do, how do you replicate that on the job training? How do you come to understand what the machine is doing for you? So I think it will become more and more challenging for them. The focus needs to be, make sure you clearly understand all end-to-end process and payroll, but then you're going to have to start spending some time understanding the capabilities of automation and what is the machine really doing on your behalf. So it'll be assisting you in getting your job done.
Wow. Yeah. And
Yeah, we talk about bots and we talk about AI and machine learning, and it all sounds quite intimidating, right?
Exactly.
So we really want to emphasize it's about the human and machine collaboration and getting those machines to automate all of those repetitive tasks, like you were saying, Wilson. So how can we elevate that role of the payroll professional to be much more strategic, to look at data and analyze data, and you're right, the payroll professional skill set is starting to change quite a bit. 10, 20, 30 years ago, it was much more about looking at transactions and managing transactions. And it was, to be honest, very paper-based, right? So now you're talking about automating things to such a degree that now we're expecting our payroll professionals to be able to analyze data and understand how to work within cloud-based systems. There was a Robert Half survey done last year where they asked, what are the top skills required for a payroll professional in the era of digital transformation? And it was very interesting to see the results, because the top skill at 26% was communication.
Wow.
So definitely communication, because you have to take that data and you have to know how to communicate it with your HR and financial stakeholders, right? The second skill that came in was around managing cloud-based ERP systems, and the third was data analysis. So all of it really is
Interesting.
kind of
Wow.
coming together.
So
Yeah.
how are companies or organizations handling that? How are they reskilling their people? Or are they waiting for people to retire and bring in new people? Or is there an effort to take those jobs and evolve them? with this new
well,
technology.
Speaking for us, we're embarking upon that. We know that change is coming. So I think all employers need to start embracing that a little bit and moving towards retraining colleagues with regards to what that picture looks like, what that role looks like. It's focused more on the analysis, being a strategic partner. It's understanding, as I said, what can robotics do for you? What can automation? What can artificial intelligence do for you? I think some of the stuff that doesn't change is the focus on having payroll experts be the end-to-end expert. Even in today, it's a challenge where payroll is partitioned. There are certain people that do certain aspects of payroll, and I think part of what we're trying to do is to push towards understanding everything from end to end, because I think the first challenge will be making sure that you understand everything, such that, as Kosin was saying, with regards to coming in and performing that analysis, being able to package up the conclusion of a payroll and then to effectively communicate that to people who want to know. So it is condensing a lot of stuff, but I think the starting point is focusing on understand payroll, make sure that you really understand that, and make sure that you are putting plans in place to train people who come in an era of what looks like what the future will be, as opposed to the traditional training that we do today.
Yeah, and with these tools, it's about incrementally adding them, right? Because you might already be using Slack at your company if you're one of those high-tech firms, or a bit more advanced. But if you're a manufacturing company on the Midwest, that's maybe not as prevalent. But however, you might be seeing a lot of people move to mobile, right? So how do you enable some of those things and think about how that fits into your end-to-end payroll process to help with self-service, to manage kind of the expectations we're seeing, like you were talking about the changing demographics in the workforce. We have a lot more millennials in the workforce, right? They want to be able to engage with your systems like they engage with Netflix, like how they engage with Google. So why can't you, talk into your phone and ask payroll questions and ask the most common payroll questions that might reduce your call center volume. So start to experiment with some of these technologies where appropriate, and you can start to see the value. But yeah, definitely the end-to-end on the payroll processing side. So it's really looking at both sides, right? Both the payroll processing as well as getting that out to employees.
Well, and interesting, the employers that do some of that are able to engage their employees the way that they engage in normal life are going to have that competitive advantage.
That's right.
I mean, I think that is the direction that employers need to go. They need to be thinking about. It's not, again, as we talked about earlier, the compensation and benefits. There's other things, and that's how the millennials experience everyday life. That's how they expect to be experiencing how they work.
Yeah,
That's how we all do.
Yes.
that's how we all do. You're right, exactly. I mean, you're talking about AI and predictive machine learning to spot anomalies and audits, right? It's about that predictive pattern. So why can't you have your system recommend to you as a payroll professional what you should be processing when?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
To maximize the efficiency of the system and also help you manage events as they occur. So it's much more event-driven. It's much more predictive and intelligent, and really helping you do your job better.
Kind of
And-
like
and
Waze
actually-
that got me here on time this morning. Payroll, giving directions, giving changes in route based on what's going on in the environment.
Well, and we see personalization, so that there's that whole experience that we're talking about, but then personalizing it to the specifics of that individual, and being able to use the data that you know about them to be able to personalize that experience.
And
that
so what are
again,
some examples of how you would personalize the experience of payroll?
Where we're seeing it mostly right now is on the benefit side, because there's so much information about helping historical data be able to help provide guidance and advice to people on their benefit decisions. But on the payroll side, I think I could see in the area, because it's always a topic coming up in 2000. We'll have a new W-4. I can see trying to. It's too fast of an example, but I can see going forward where people always struggle with what should I do on my W-4, what election should I make, and is there a way for there to be some personalized information that would help them understand, the best thing for you maybe to select is the following.
Yeah.
This is your W-4 election.
I
It may
never
not be
know
the best
that.
of
I'm
example,
always
but
calling my husband and saying, "What am I supposed to
what
put
should I
in?"
select? You go through the form, but the form is based upon what the employee feeds into it.
Right.
But can you bring in other data that software knows about the individual to say, hey, you may be making the wrong decision and resulting in under or over withholding.
Love that. All right, you guys might get me excited about payroll. Are you seeing these, any industries move faster than others in adopting these changes in payroll?
Our experience is that it's more the financial minded industry. The folks in the banking and the finance industry, they tend to be a bit more
Technology friendly and savvy?
their organization is filled with people in an office, not out in the field and stuff, and I think it lends itself to them. I would say it's probably more so there. It's the starting point.
Yeah, but I mean, we're seeing the same thing too. But usually we see this impetus to change, and it's not necessarily just industry based. It's your payroll system is gonna fail you. You can see that kind of coming, right? We work with a customer who was on a very old system. I won't mention which system, but they had to come in at 3 a.m. to make sure that it was running, and it was a batch process, and everything was, they were just like on pins and needles hoping that it would continue to run. So that's not the situation you want to be in, whether you're in a high-tech company, which I can't imagine, but we're a manufacturing company. So it's really about looking at your end-to-end payroll process and figure out, hey, is this really limiting us, right?
Right.
And you don't want to be that payroll professional stuck with that and being responsible for not getting people paid on time.
Exactly. So speaking of the payroll professionals, what are their challenges? And if they have that old system and they see the writing on the wall, or they see just that they want to move forward with something more modern and flexible, what challenges are they facing in making that transition, or culturally within the organization?
Payroll's a big influencer, right? You guys are running payrolls, you're supporting the business, but oftentimes a lot of those decisions are really made from the C-level, right? So we always encourage payroll professionals and practitioners to have a voice. You guys are definitely influential, and you're supporting strategic initiatives, whether your company is trying to spin up new services or new parts of the business. They need payroll to support it, because there's a people equation to that, typically, right?
Right.
And if you have to hire a bunch of people at once, you see that quite a lot in the retail industry. You have to terminate a huge amount of people too, and that's all supported by payroll. So, can your system support that? Can your system support the strategic initiatives the company is counting on? And that's how you kind of upsell those kinds of ideas. But you want to grow. You want to grow these ideas, and you want to gain peers that are like-minded and get them on board and thinking about these things. That's really the starting point I see.
Yeah, and I think maybe to add to that, in terms of the challenge, I think the mind shift that they'll go through is one of I do to I analyze and I oversee, and so that it goes back to that training concept, and they still will have to have that understanding, but it ultimately comes down to, I think their job becomes more analytical. I think the interesting thing is that those that embrace it and start to understand that and move in that direction can find a very interesting job in the future.
And, challenging.
Yes, it's we have colleagues at times that running and doing the same things day in and day out could at some time get a little tiring. When you're doing an analysis of a payroll run, I don't know if there's anything boring in that. Every week, every bi-weekly, something could be changing in that, and thinking of that as a puzzle that needs to be unraveled and then understood and put the picture together. I think could be actual interesting work. So those that embrace it, those start to understand what all the technology is doing for them, and really try to focus on being that business partner. I think you were hitting on
Right.
some of that with acquisitions, and come to us, let us assist. I think that can be a very interesting a role for them to have.
Because they understand that context of the full payroll process and how that supports
Absolutely.
each part of the business.
Many of our clients are looking for more than just, hey, get the payroll out the door. They're looking for insights. How do I do this better? So I think as colleagues free themselves up through some of the automation, they will afford themselves some time to start focusing on more of the process improvement, more of the insights that they see in the data. But those are the challenges they'll have to be able to focus on being able to do that.
Yeah.
And we actually see a spectrum of customers that work with us that have been on a journey, and it is a journey. And it's important to understand where you are relative to your peers and where you are on that journey relative to yourselves, right, and where you can be. So we've put together a payroll maturity model, which we will actually link.
Cool.
In one of the links below. But it will ask you a number of questions to determine where you are along that journey. And it's really great because it gives you a sense of, are you more reactive, right? Are you kind of starting out being more reactive and being much more transactional, growing to be more controlled, so that you have, and you have the systems to support that control, to being more strategic, right? We talked about having more of a unified system and being able to automate some pieces, to being predictive. So predictive in the way that we were saying, proactively managing payroll, right? With the smart automation, the smart ML. We've been talking about, for instance, auditing, right? Being able to use smart audits enabled by ML to tell you what the patterns are and what your payroll should be looking like this period, right? So those are the things that we expect to surface, being much more intelligent about how you're processing payroll, but seeing your whole end-to-end process as well as how that's being enabled by technology and seeing where you map along that maturity model.
Oh, interesting.
That's a very
Sounds
interesting thing, because your example there is a very good one. If you think about the future of a payroll analyst, I think it's very similar to an auditor. The difference is an auditor is looking at financial statements that
Right.
they did not create. Somebody else did the underlying financial transactions. Well, in the future, I think the payroll analyst may not have done all the work in the payroll, but they have to come in and quote audit and conclude that it's right. So it's an interesting analogy, but I think that's how they actually move.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting. And you mentioned, you touched on ML and AI before. What else are we going to see machine learning or artificial intelligence drive in terms of, you touched on predictions. Is it going to predict my payroll going forward? Is it going to predict trends? Is it going to what else do we anticipate we'll get, or benefits that we'll get from that technology?
What we're working on currently is specifically the gross to net. When you run a calculation, trying to examine every earning, deduction, and tax that's in that run, and
lot of data.
utilizing the historical pay runs of that individual to say, hey, this is an anomaly or not. I think what will occur is trying to move that into pre-payroll. So as you think about data that comes in via an integration or other inputs that come in, how do you subject those inputs to a quality review, if you will, using machine learning for it to identify, hey, while you submitted it, I mean, how do you detect somebody fat fingering and add an extra zero on something, right? That may pop out as an anomaly, and how do you identify those through machine learning, and then position that for the user to see that error pretty quickly and be able to resolve it in real time. I can see that moving closer and closer to the submitter of the inputs. Right now, where we're focused on is just trying to make sure that the quality of a calculation can be done utilizing all the information which we have, which is all that historical pay history.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, totally agree with you. That sounds really interesting and fascinating. And I think we'll see really the beginnings of it focused on the anomalies, the time anomalies, the payroll anomalies, and payroll forecasting. But a big wave of AI and ML and automation is really around RPA, and we haven't talked about that quite as much. Talked a lot about machine learning. RPA is where we're seeing
And RPA is defined again?
robotic process automation. So the digital worker, we call him the digital worker because, he can do all the work for you, and then you can go home, right?
Or the empty chair worker, the swivel chair worker,
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that, the person who's shifting information from one system to another.
Right.
That's not a person, that's a robot instead.
Yeah. So looking at what are some processes and use cases you can start with to enable with robotic process automation, right? So it's looking at, maybe time absences and, trying to even look at approvals for time and chase down approvals for you as a payroll administrator. So there's lots of different
Interesting.
ways to use RPA.
That's a good example.
Yeah.
A lot of times time will be submitted, but it's not approved, and you're waiting on that. You have a decision to make to go with what's been
What you
submitted but
have,
not yet approved. But if you can identify those things easily and push it to the manager that has that awaiting task and ask them to actually act upon that quicker, you find that the quality of the payroll will pick up. But interesting.
Robot will go up to their front door, the manager's front door, and ring the
They're-
doorbell.
Hey,
Well,
where is it?
well, maybe text them and give them a text and
text
say,
them,
hey,
yeah,
click this
yeah.
link that you got an action to do. But on the HR side, when you think about, and you mentioned earlier about self-service, self-service has been around as a concept for a long time, but interestingly enough, you still find a lot of times where transactions are accepted. A manager may have done a transaction, and that data, while accepted, is still not good. So the quality of your HCM data could be at risk. I can see artificial intelligence trying to help that manager make better decisions in terms of what they enter. Because I think some of the
Yep.
challenges today, if a manager does a transaction several times a year, they never quite
don't-
get good at it,
right,
and
right,
they may
it's not
not
frequent
know
enough.
all of the information that is presented to them. What's the answer? What do I select for a cost center, or do I continue to use the position, or do I retire?
Right.
I mean, all those questions, and I don't think most people who are outside the HR space really focus on that. So being able to use artificial intelligence to gauge them, to guide them through, so that they can make better selections of data on the first time to improve that quality.
Yep. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, one of our customers I was talking to, and that was really interesting, and so, they saw this transformation coming to RPA and AI, and they actually trained their payroll administrators to program robots. And so they used the expertise in the payroll administrators, background and minds to actually make sure that the robots were doing things and doing them right. And so I thought that was a really interesting example of preparing for RPA or preparing for this transformation that's happening in payroll. And I'd be curious of what other things we're kind of recommending customers or organizations do when they start thinking about transformation. What do they, who do they need to engage in the organization? What are some things they need to think about if they're going from, checking on payroll at 3 a.m. to robots who are pinging the managers?
Well, I think the example you use is a good one around employees themselves being able to manage that bot themselves. I think what may be an interesting or could be a risk is that you have a small selected group of people who can manage the bots, but if
Right.
you put them out there so much and the only people who can fix them are a few, and bots will at times not run, and they need to be tweaked. They need
They
to be
get
adjusted. Well, they don't get sick. The code might have affected them such that they don't run. And I think to your question, I think employers as they deploy bots will have to have a strategy in which you can't have a few do the maintenance of all the bots. You'll need to
interesting.
have
everyone have that level of knowledge.
And it may not be that they have to have the knowledge to go create real fancy ones, but they're going to have at least some understanding of, if the thing stops, how do you engage it to fix whatever the offending error was to get it started again.
So again, skills are changing, right?
Skills are changing.
Yeah, you're not just looking at transactions and paper, and so it requires people to think more broadly, right? So like having that end-to-end payroll process in mind,
Right.
instead of a siloed view, that will help you manage those bots, right? And be able to see how you can really extract value out of these things, right? It's about, and I think people think about these bots replacing them. that's what we
Exactly,
hear
that's
a
what
lot.
we hear a
And
lot.
that's not the point, right? The point is to make the bots work for you. And,
Right, and do the stuff you don't really
right.
want to do.
Right.
Well,
So,
the bot is really just software, and you think about any software goes through upgrades, and when you have those upgrades, somebody may have to touch the bot to make sure that the bot continues to work after the upgrade was installed. So, so back to your question, I think that change in skill set will require payroll colleagues, HR colleagues to be able to say, if I got a bot that's part of what my process is, it's my digital assistant. How do I maintain that digital assistant so that when it goes awry, I know how to get it started again.
And it's not just unplug it and plug it in again.
That's right. I think it's a little bit more than that.
yeah. Super interesting, right? I
Yes.
mean, where we're
Right.
headed. You couldn't have imagined it 20 years ago.
No. And what, is there any way to prepare the rest of the organization for what's coming? People like me who never think about payroll, do the payroll professionals have to communicate out what they're doing or what they're thinking about? Or does it just come and the employees go along with it?
So my sense is that those that are on the receiving end of a paycheck will probably it's invisible to them about the impacts that's happening to them. What may change on them is what we were talking about earlier about the employee experience on their end.
And what more they can do.
Right.
Yeah, and how do we engage them in terms of the experience of how they receive pay and everything HR related. But I don't think there's much to communicate to them around what's happening in the core of payroll. I think that's more closed to the group that's actually processing payroll. But there is that component that deals with how you engage the employee on the receiving end. You were talking about the self-service and how they receive pay and how they receive their stub. I don't know if that will be as earth-shattering as the stuff that we're talking about that affects payroll, because it seems to be that's happening in everyday life and everything that you engage on, whether it's social media, whether it is Netflix, and it's just how
We're
people
getting used
consume.
to change
Yes.
and technology really quickly. Yeah.
Well, I think by virtue of attending this this live panel, you're
Right,
learning,
no,
right?
that's
So
true.
I think continue learning and bring this back to your organization, right? Where we're seeing change is where people are looking at the end-to-end, and our advice is to look at how you're running payroll today and why are you doing certain things? Are you doing things because of outdated technology? Start there. Right? You can point to some of the inefficiencies in the manual work, and that might be an opportunity for you to then move further. Right? You need that cause for change, and whether it's staying up till 3 a.m. on Christmas Day, hoping whether payroll will run, that's not ideal, obviously. But technology should not be the inhibitor; it should be the enabler, and that's one piece of advice we give to people.
Oh, that's interesting.
To start looking at, how you start on the digital transformation path.
Well, and I think about as the organization's goals change or the organization's behavior changes, like an organization shifts to more gig workers, the payroll team being ahead of that shift sounds like it would be pretty critical to actually having it be successful, or workers who expect that instant payment every day instead of a once-a-month paycheck, which it sounds like is quickly going away.
Yeah, I think that's definitely coming. I think immediacy and now I want it now. I think that's driving payroll to find those solutions that enable them to get paid in a more frequent way. I think the interesting thing with with gig workers, it will payroll needs to start thinking about those if they truly are contractors. Typically, you don't find contractors in the payroll
Payroll
system.
system.
They're in the HR system for other reasons, but you're not necessarily being paid by the payroll process. But I think as the evolution of gig workers starts to take place, it may well be that we start to find that payroll colleagues
has
are processing payments for those gig workers who are now contractors. And not every contractor may come through an agency. We talked about the flexibility of work and people wanting to work where they are. There's going to be a lot of specialty around not only the work that we do, but I think generally speaking in all work, such that a person with a specific skill set maybe employers may look at those individuals to come in and do a certain thing. You think about we're fast coming up on the year-end time frame and stuff around year-end project plans and getting W-2s out. There may be a person out there or people out there that have a specific skill set, and we may hire them just to assist when getting W-2s out the door, and they're going to be there for 40 hours, 80 hours, and as they are doing that work, they may want to, as a contractor, get paid
every day.
Get paid every day. And so,
Interesting.
what is the solution to that? Are they on the payroll system, and does the payroll system take care of that, or you do it in your traditional way? I think the traditional way through AP just won't be fast enough.
Huh.
And the challenges are not really the technology, right? You can create a solution that can calculate that daily pay.
Absolutely.
It's more around the processes and the taxes around that, right? So, and funding that. And
Absolutely,
I know
yeah.
the IRS hasn't quite given all the full guidance on how to manage this, but it's coming, and so I think there's a bit of catch up that we're starting to see on this. And I know that this was the hottest topic at APA Congress this year when we went, and there were about 10 sessions on this, fully packed, 300
Wow.
people in the room. And it's because we
Interesting.
want to stay ahead of that. We want to know how we manage this going forward.
Yeah, when you think about it, National Payroll Week coming up next week, 70% of all revenue that goes into the IRS is collected by payroll professionals.
Yes.
And if you think about that staggering number, and if you think that over time some of those employees transition to contractors, there is an IRS implication. Wait a minute, all of a sudden 70% starts to diminish a little bit. I think they'll have something to say about receiving the deceleration of how they receive tax monies into the Treasury. So that could be some definite change in that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for
Stay tuned
for
on independent-
regulation.
Yes.
Interesting. Well, as we kind of wrap up here, anything we didn't cover, any thoughts or takeaways that you want our audience kind of to think about as they go through their day today and the rest of the week and enter into payroll week?
I would say that maybe a couple of the themes that we talked about. The competition for talent is real. It will be out there. I think employers that understand the differentiation of what makes them what they are, what they need to do in terms of being flexible to attract the best workers in the future. I think that's going to be critical for them. So all employers ought to be thinking, how am I different, and how do I promote myself with the people that I'm trying to have in my workplace?
And it's not just snacks.
No, so I think that's one. I think the second one is automation. We talked about it. If you haven't started, start someplace. Pick a process, a high volume process. Try to get engaged in thinking about how you do that. If you don't have that expertise, go seek expertise. But I think because it's coming, you need to engage yourself in that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I totally
Good
agree with
retailer.
everything Wilson said. Great takeaways. I would just impress upon the payroll professionals out there to take this as an opportunity for you to stand out. Think about how you want to grow your career at your company, how you want to become that strategic advisor to the business, and you can on the technology side, on the end-to-end business side, if you start to do the research, start to look at what's coming and how your company can get more value out of their payroll process. So, that's my advice. But the one thing I do want to end on is I want to salute all the practitioners out there for doing such an amazing job all year long. This is your week to celebrate, and we salute you.
Yes, absolutely.
I just want to add my congratulations and to all the payroll people out there. I know there's a lot of folks that are from my company at Self Watching, so thank you all for the work that you do. But to all payroll professionals, have a wonderful National Payroll Week next week.
And for someone who now knows a lot more about payroll than I did an hour ago, thank you for always making sure the payroll is in my bank account and in a timely and accurate manner. So appreciate it much more now than I did an hour ago. And thank you to our panelists today. I actually really enjoyed getting into the depth on payroll today and all the really exciting pieces and technology and developments that are happening in the payroll space. So thank you to our audience for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you next month. I think we're doing this monthly on wdaychats. Have a great day.